there are bidding going on. There are so many designers already occupying that space.
You'll need to have a very broad level understanding of the
Right.
entire spectrum, and then you can specialize in one.
The moment they don't see any UX experience, they would just discard.
The problems that we are solving are very familiar to them. Discuss about the problems that are meaningful to them. They relate almost immediately.
Like, can you do it for 8 hours and not get frustrated?
It's adding miraculous value to team building.
I've been there. I felt like,
How could you get...
Arya, welcome to In Perspective.
So nice to be here.
So you're an award-winning UX designer. Even if I exclude the word of award-winning, a lot of people are struggling to transition from any other profession to UX design, and you have no design background. How did you do that?
That's a great story. So the transition happened at my first job. I was working in a technical role because my background is in engineering, and I was hired for that right after college. And one night I was in the pantry. I was sketching something to gift one of my friends back at college. And my TL, he just walks in and he goes, that's really good, Arya. Are you interested in UI UX? And this is 10 years ago, so the term is pretty much new. And I asked him, what is that? So from there, the journey evolves where he introduces me to the head of design there. He gives me and a few more others who are interested in design a test to assess how we would make the transition. So the very first assignment I got was to make a paper wireframe of a bus conductor to check if the passengers are onboarded correctly. We were doing a lot of enterprise apps back then, so this was one of the use cases which was very close to a travel and transportation use case that we were working for one of the clients there.
Did you study a little bit of UX, or did you have an idea because you've got some work that is a case study and then you jumped into it and you did it? But then did you have a little bit of prior experience in UX design?
That evening was when I first discovered the concept of UX design. I was always interested in design. I was very artistically inclined, but then because of the societal pressures and the structure of careers in India, I had to choose engineering. So when I got this opportunity, that's where I decided, or I understood that I need to prove my commitment to this discipline, right? So that's where I started doing certification in UX design alongside my work. So first, I proved my commitment by demonstrating the certification as well as designing for use cases that were close to them. I also did a lot of case studies at that time to showcase my thinking and my thought process and how it all came together. Second, it helped a lot to build advocacy for myself. And this did not happen by force. It sort of happened naturally. There were a lot of people around me who believed in me and who thought that I could make the transition. So that advocacy really helped. This was built through a lot of... for the studio itself that I was working in, I did sketches, caricatures. I did presentations for clients who walked in, like talking about design, giving walkthroughs. So which were things that I could do within my capacity at that organization, right? So that built a lot of leadership traction for me and a lot of advocacy. And this sort of helped putting that case together for me. And then the transition happened around 6 months after the line.
So as somebody... as from any profession, let's say they could be an engineer, and it's easier, I think, if you're in tech. But if you're not, let's say you're an operation executive or you're a salesperson, they want to transition into UX design. And you mentioned about advocacy. Not everyone is privileged to have that, probably. What could be your advice to them, whoever wants to transition? There are like some 51 people who reached out to me on LinkedIn asking this one question, that I want to switch to UX. How do I do that? And they're from different professions altogether.
They'll have to leverage their connections and reduce their gap between their current profession and the UX world. So if they are unfortunate to be in the same organization, they'll have to find ways to access the UX team within that organization or some organizations which is nearby to demonstrate their value.
Yeah.
So the transition will happen when the UX team or the decision makers in this context will understand and appreciate your skill set, right?
Right.
So in the background, you'll work on building your skill set and your credibility. And then you will close the gap between wherever you are and to the nearest UX team. So you can actually showcase your skill set there and make the transition happen.
Right. So let's say you started with the certifications, what would be the potential certifications that they can pursue in order to just to get the entry in this industry?
There are a lot of certifications out there in the market. I started with a certification from UX Mint, which is an organization in India. After that, I did more
Was it paid?
It was paid.
Okay.
So it was something that I could afford at that point in time, and it also had very rich material in terms of understanding the UX
Is
processes
it like an
and the world.
in-person course or is it like an online course?
It was an in-person course. I was based out of Bangalore at the time, so I had to travel to the studio there in the weekends to do the course.
Right.
It was a very immersive project-based course where we were
Right.
also doing a project during the course for facilitating its completion. I also recommend the Nielsen Norman certification.
I've heard about that, but I didn't do it myself.
It's great. They have multiple series and models. So, for example, you have the one-day certification,
Yeah.
and
But do you think it's worth it, that one day one? I think UX is vast. There's so much to know. Like, especially if you're transitioning, you have no idea about what UX is all about. Do you think one day course would be actually worth it and it's worth spending money on it?
so their certification program is actually quite well structured. So even if you it's credit based, so only if you take if I remember correctly 5 one-day courses, you will get one basic certification. So you can either take a one-day course, then there is also a concept where the one-day course is split into 2 days where you can do like 4 hours each. But what I would strongly recommend is their series. So they have series on UX research and UX management. So especially when you're looking to specialize, those would actually give you a very concrete understanding, because you will be with the same team for all the 5 days.
Right.
And then the course facilitators, they'll all start leaving comments on your work, which you will progressively build during the 1 week. So if you're doing Nielsen Norman, then you can start with probably 1 day UX foundations courses and the foundation courses, and then to specialize, to a full-fledged series with them. The other good ones that I've heard about are the Interaction Design Foundation one.
In Nelson?
There is IDF, right?
Yeah.
So you can do that, and then you can also do HFI, or there's also certification from Google these days. So you can do any of these.
I think there is a free course on Google, right, on Coursera. I think I recommend that to everyone, because whoever wants to transition, it looks like really a lucrative profession, UX design. But then you need to know if this is something you really want to do. Like, can you do it for 8 hours and not get frustrated? So I would recommend that don't put money immediately. First, know if this is something that you really want to do, and then go ahead with it. Can you recommend some free courses? If I think you haven't done any free courses, but is there anything that you would recommend?
You can also go to Nielsen Norman site. They have a lot of free articles.
Yeah, anybody can access, right?
Anybody can access this, and there is also videos that are coming embedded in this. You can start with just subscribing to the Nielsen Norman newsletter, and you'll get a curated list of articles every day.
I think it'll be helpful for them. Like, I have a major design background. I've done bachelor's in design and everything. If I were to start from scratch in UX design, I really don't have a roadmap. How did you exactly get into this so easily, and how can somebody do the same? Especially your first company as a UX designer was IBM. How can somebody do the same?
So I was there in the right place at the right time. I told you the story in the beginning of how it all started. After I did my certification, I started helping out in smaller UX projects. I was given a lot of trust, lot of opportunity.
Within IBM?
Yes. Because I was working in the same space in a different role, right? So it was easy for me to sort of also support on the other projects. So I think if you are working in any capacity within a particular organization, it's easier
do the transition within the organization,
and then move out as an experienced professional. The biggest thing here is that the organization should be an organization that listens to you.
Exactly,
Because you'll need to have advocates, you'll need to have a support system to keep you going when you are down, because this process is, it's not like a clear career path, right? So there will be a lot of moments where you are not sure what is happening, but we keep consistently giving our 100%. But even after that, there is a lot of external factors, right? So you need a strong support system to keep you motivated, and you need strong advocates to believe in you and give you that chance.
I would just take notes here. It's like, if they transition within the same organization, first of all, get involved in UX projects that are going on and show that you are highly interested in it. Once you have the knowledge that once you know the surroundings, like what's going on, what this project is all about, when your knowledge is equal to the UX designer's knowledge, however, I'm not talking about skills, I'm talking about the knowledge of the product that is going on, then maybe they can reach out to the higher level manager and then do this transition if they allow to. That is the easiest way somebody can switch, right?
That's what I did. So
Yeah.
I can say that it worked for me. You have to show a lot of commitment,
Yeah.
saying that this is what I want. So you cannot be in a mindset that I'm not sure, and then go for that. I was very sure that this is what I wanted.
The scenario that I've given, it's like when the person is trying to get into UX but also trying to join another organization. So the possibility of that happening is very less. Because the first round of filtering, the moment they don't see any UX experience, they would just discard it. Like you won't even get a chance to showcase your interest and commitment that I'm really interested in. I have the knowledge, but what's the proof? Did you get paid as a UX designer? No, then
Exactly. I think you'll need like a solid 2-3 years to make a switch.
Cocoon Series is something that I have seen on your LinkedIn, and that is something is very new to me. I've never heard this word cocoon. If you can emphasize on that, and then I would like jump right into about your work. So if you can tell me something about it.
When I was working in my first design team in IBM, we had 4 design leads there, and they were all specialists in different areas. And what all of us, when we were juniors at that point in time, got was a very T-shaped competency.
What is T-shaped competency?
So we have I-shaped people and T-shaped people, right? So for example, if you build our competency as a T-shaped individual, you can build depth in one particular domain, but you can have your breadth across all domains. So today, to function as a UX consultant, right, you cannot, downsize and say that I will only do UX, or I will just do UI, or I'll not look at business, or I'll not look at the finer aspects of the design system. You'll need to have a very broad level understanding of the entire spectrum, and then you can specialize in one.
I-shaped is basically the specialization, and the T-shaped is you have the specialization, and then there are topics aligned to that one topic. So can we call a UX generalist coming under the T-shape?
So a UX generalist have a very broad understanding of all the topics, but in this case, we are still hiring for specialists. So they will have a very deep understanding on one particular domain. So maybe a UX generalist, something like that, where they have a varying amount of knowledge in each of these specialties. But when you're hiring specialists, you need to make sure that they understand the wider spectrum. Otherwise, it will be a difficult space of collaboration and also cross-skilling, right? So when I was in my first organization, I had these 4 leads with me who were all specialists in different areas. But what they actively did for the team like us was to share that knowledge so that we could transform and grow with them. So our T-shaped competency started slowly building out. So we could decide 5 years down the line, where is that we wanted to specialize. So I wanted to create the same thing for my team, which is the idea for the Cocoon session or Cocoon series.
That's so incredible.
So Cocoon, it was named by my colleague Ajay. We named it when we were traveling for one of the workshops, and Cocoon actually represents a pivotal point in transformation.
Yes.
In the life cycle of a butterfly, right?
Oh my God, I love this word, cocoon and transformation.
So we wanted to emphasize that it's about that state of growing, not completion, which is why we picked a state in the middle.
And is it also UX specific? Is it happening only in the design team, or is it happening throughout, like all over in the organization?
So right now it is centered on the design team, because our objective itself is to build this T-shaped competency, and the T that we are looking at this point in time is very centered to design and the various disciplines of designs. So we have on every last Friday of the month a designer from our team speaking on their specialty. Now this is phenomenal because we have a lot of specialists in our team as well, and they get to actually share the nitty-gritties of their work with the wider team. The way the results of this manifest is just beautiful. So in one of these sessions, one of the designers spoke about data-driven design. In the next week, we had a discovery session that was running, and we wanted to do a formative research-based use case, which sort of evolved out of the discovery. So when we were doing that, we tried to not just stick to qualitative
Or
inputs,
quantitative, yeah.
but we looked at also the data of how the customers were transacting,
Yeah.
and we brought out the trends for that also to build the story of the interviews that we conducted with the stakeholders. So when we presented it back, we presented the trends that we thought that we gathered from interviewing these stakeholders, along with the data evidence that supported that. So that created a great, like a great context building and a great story
Yeah.
to present back and say
And it's so
that
strong. Like, it's so, like, people are going to believe in it and people are going to willing to be invested.
we do use a lot of data-driven design.
What is data-driven design?
So, data-driven design just means that you look at data instead of your intuition to
Yeah.
make decisions.
But also, don't you think that sometimes we need to believe our intuitions and make things happen rather than, I mean, I have read a LinkedIn post where somebody was actually bashing down the people who are talking about data-driven design. They were like, "It's not that complicated. Just do it as a human. If you feel it's right, it's right. If you feel it's not, it's not. It's why to complicate things, add data." What's your perspective on it? Like, what's your
I think it's how you build it, how you identify the right use cases for it. So intuition is something that comes out of experience, right? And you will have some strong gut feeling about certain things. There's nothing wrong in validating that gut feeling
right?
with some
Absolutely.
data, right? So it will only build a more compelling case. Now it doesn't mean that we'll go and say let's look at data for each and every small UX design decision, but it's more about identifying what are the right use cases where we can pivot to this. Like for example, you have like two very different product onboarding concepts for the product page. You cannot decide, both has its own merits. You cannot decide which one is the right way to go forward because either could work. So that is a good case for you A/B testing, where you could run both both the journeys, and you could like look at what is the winner and then pivot to that particular journey, right? Instead of relying on the designer's intuition saying this looks
Yeah,
better, so let's go
absolutely.
with that.
Yeah.
Instead of that, we can look at this more co-creative
Right.
approach.
There are a lot of words we used in between. I think people who are not in the industry might not just get the terms and jargons like immediately. Could you break it down when you mentioned UX discovery? Could you break it down that part?
When we say UX discovery, we usually mean understanding the problem into a great depth so that we can get to a solution. I believe a lot in convergence. So it requires a great deal of bringing the right people in the room so they can problem solve together to isolate the right problems and then build the solutions for that. So when I say discovery, from my perspective, we are running a workshop where we could bring all these individuals together into one room so they don't problem solve in an isolated fashion. So we bring people from product, people from policy, people from marketing, people from tech, people from design, all of them into a room where we have a very formalized structure for discovery sprints in Mashreq.
To have like different perspective of people working across the company, but then they have a very different perspective of it, I guess.
Yes, we have a particular structure on cadence in which we run discoveries. There are many models, like we have Google's design sprints. We have also design thinking frameworks which we can adapt, plug and play, deep dive into what our risks and metrics are.
And all of those people are involved in it, right?
Yes, and all their perspectives come out during that
But
particular.
do all of them understand, or it's like what this is all about? Because these are like UX specific terms, and these are our processes: design thinking process, and then qualitative and quantitative research, and all of that. So when you're including somebody from, let's say, marketing team, are you including somebody like that?
Yes.
So if you're including them, like, do they have difficulty understanding the process of what this is all about?
So at this point, I think they are very familiar with all of this. Even if they are, let's say, if you're starting out, even if they're unfamiliar with the cadences and processes, the problems that we are solving are very familiar to them, right? Because it's very out of the business context for them itself, right? So when you bring them into the picture, even if they don't understand the cadences, as the discussions evolve, they discuss about the problems that are meaningful to them. So they relate almost immediately.
Yeah.
And I have seen this in workshops where teams are constrained by what they can do, right? Because they understand what they do alone.
Yes.
So when product team will solve a problem in a particular
Yes.
way, marketing will solve it in a different way, policy will
Absolutely.
solve it in a different way. But when they're together and we define this high level problem, this is the problem that we're trying to solve, you see that lines like sort of dissolving, and then
They all think in the
in
same
the same
way.
direction and
And
sort of try to ideate and conceptualize and solutionize the problem together.
so it's like putting all of them, making sure that we are all on the same page. Is this also part of Cocoon series?
No, it's part of the discovery. So
Oh,
Cocoon
okay.
Series is a learning initiative that we are running in CCPL, and discovery workshops are part of our mainstream work, where we bring in all these different stakeholders. We have different time frames and formats for this. So we have sometimes, if it's really short, we do a 3-day workshop.
Yeah.
If it's really long, then we do like a 1-month workshop. And our optimal length is around 2 weeks, where we can go from design to a solution with an end roadmap and everything. There are a lot of roles that are involved in this entire end-to-end process, and there are also cadences on the days. So everybody need not be involved in all the days, right? Like you were mentioning, marketing, product, they will be very heavily invested in the first 2 days, where we are exploring the problem space and ideating, and then there would be breakout sessions with the designers, where the designers would then design and then come back. We usually wrap things with user testing, where we bring in 5 customers, and they look in the initial concept and give their feedback, which would then go back into the sprint structure when we are sprinting.
I think I find the Cocoon series specifically really interesting. I feel like it helps you connect with the professionals on a deeper level also while you get to know them. Is it specific to Mashreq, or is it like anybody can be a part of this series?
At this point in time, it's very specific to Mashreq, because we started it just to build our team, and it was also the first time we were having an onshore team. So when I started as an individual contributor. There were just a finite number of designers who were supporting all co-located, all working out of UAE. But now we also have designers in India, Pakistan, etc. So we want to bring all of them together in a space which is not about strictly about work, where they could talk and express. So Cocoon was born out of that.
Yeah.
And there's a very high level of engagement, because the team is very close knit, and because it's towards the smaller side of things, right? So it doesn't feel like a session. It's like one of those, like this conversation.
What is the direct impact of Cocoon on those products, or you can say the projects that specifically you're working on? You get to know the profession on a deeper level. I think that's brilliant. But then how Cocoon is this series is adding value to that.
I think more than adding value to projects, it's adding miraculous value to team building, wherein the team feels very heard, especially when you are in a different location, and most of the designers are based out of one location. You feel very disconnected. And I have been in the other side of this.
Absolutely. I've been there. I've been there. I felt like, okay, nobody's hearing me, so I need to probably switch. But probably if something like this would have been introduced, I wouldn't have left the company.
It creates that connect. I think that is the biggest win that Cocoon has ever had. There are a lot of influences that get carried forward from Cocoon into the work. Like there was a session on Lottie animations that our interaction designer did, and after that there was a sudden increase in requests, to have Lotties incorporated in the design and in interstitial screens so people started actively looking for use cases for this.
Oh,
So
okay.
when people feel close to something, when designers feel like they understand something, they try to, it's like this whole new perspective has opened, right?
Yes.
So then they become more open to taking that into their design, because people are very people look at designs as their creation, right?
Yeah, people also think that design is all about creativity, which is really not the case, but it's just a problem solving mechanism, I would say. And coming to the point that does when I'm talking about design, if I tell this to anybody, literally anybody, that I'm a UX designer, I think from a perspective that okay, everyone knows what UX designer is. It's really not the case. If you ask my mom's generation or even before, the first thing that comes in their mind is fashion design. Design means fashion design. They cannot think about leave about UX. Design itself is the first thing that comes in their mind. I feel like the awareness of UX is still very less. And so these kind of things, probably if Cocoon is happening not only in the organization, but then outside of that, or maybe more and more organizations are actually adapting this, the awareness can be more than what it is right now.
Definitely. We can always come up with programs like that, right? For the
Right.
wider community where you could give back. There are a lot of communities here
It's
in
like
Dubai.
it's how many days the Cocoon series last?
It's just a 2 hour session
Mm,
which we do on every last Friday of the month.
right. So if let's say I'm running a startup, I'm not, but if I'm running a startup and I want to introduce Cocoon series to my team members, how do I get started with that?
You will need to first set an expectation of what you are expecting out of these sessions. So you can talk a bit about the T-shaped competency. You
Yeah.
can identify what your competencies are
Right.
available in your team. So you can give evaluations to all your designers to understand how they rate themselves and where do they think their specialties lie,
Right.
and where your strengths and gaps are as a team as a whole, right? So then you can augment these specialties,
Yeah.
and then you can fill the gaps. So to augment the specialties, you can first bring in your specialist designers, ask them to do sessions on what they're passionate about. So
Right.
now this spreads. Now you look at the gaps, you bring in speakers from outside to plug in those gaps. So now your designer was a specialist.
Hmm.
First he started building the T-shaped competency
Yes.
with the designers around him,
Right.
and then it further expands with every external consultant you bring in,
Hmm.
right? So for each designer they will have a variation of that T built
Okay.
right in.
And our job is to figure out that upper level, right? That what are the other things you're bringing in the table, other than UX design, other than the specialty why we hired you for, I guess.
Yes. To give a sense, our design sessions so far, we have done something on design sprints, design discoveries. We have done something on storytelling. We have done something on interaction design, how to create lotties. We have done something on data-driven design. So you can see all of these are spanning different ends of the UX spectrum, right? Right from
Right.
research into UI. So we have also a lot of UI designers and a lot of UX designers who might not be comfortable with the opposite skill set.
Right.
So this also kinds of opens that door to
Yeah.
create that
And make
cross-functional
them
thinking
comfortable.
with each
Yeah.
other. Yeah.
So, you just mentioned storytelling. So, some of the things I think storytelling is itself like a gem. Like anybody who knows how to do it, they're gonna just boom into the industry. But then, when you're talking about UX storytelling, I would like to know more about what is UX storytelling specifically. Is it that I write a lot on LinkedIn? So, is that UX storytelling, or is it something different, or there is a different concept about it?
So storytelling itself is very, very broad, and you can frame it depending upon which organizational context that you're using in. So I'm glad that you asked about this. In my last quarter at my certification for lead with
Yeah.
Stanford University, I did Power of Story, and that course was really inspiring for me.
Lead is
Lead is a certification program
okay.
for working professionals, where you could do a 1 year program with Stanford where you learn to build leadership competencies.
Okay.
So it's a fascinating
So
program.
it was on storytelling UX.
In Lead, you have to do 8 papers, and my last paper in the last quarter was on Power of Story.
Oh, okay. So basically, you did a course on storytelling itself, UX
Yes.
storytelling. And if I'm not wrong, the name of the program is LEAD from Stanford. Because it's Stanford, I have to ask, like, do they have like a criteria based on that they're selecting, or just because I am interested in UX storytelling, can I join, or do they have a criteria where they can filter out the candidates?
They do have some design focused courses like Power of Story, and they also have design thinking, but most of the papers are focused on a more business standpoint. So to apply, you have to just go to the Stanford
Yeah,
graduate school
website.
site, and then you have to write an essay, and there are a couple of entry criteria like some recommendation
Right.
letters, and then followed up by an interview with some questions, which is virtual again, and post that they announce the cohort. So in my cohort there were 444 change makers from around 54 countries, I
Oh
think.
my God, that's insane.
Wonderful community. You get to learn a lot from them, and they're very because they're all working professionals. They're very, what to say, they're willing to help. So they take you and into that journey, and they embrace you, and you sort of grow in ways that you have not seen before. So throughout my journey in UX, or as an individual or as a professional, what I've seen is we will think that we are perfect in something, right?
Yeah.
And then this new perspective opens up.
Yes.
Then that perspective completely changes you, and then you
Yeah.
become a different person. You converge to
Yes.
become
If you adapt it,
something
and
else.
if you're willing to say that, okay, this came for a reason, now I have to be open to change, then your entire life just changes. So during this lead, right, is there any specific workshops, specific projects you worked on, or anything new that you have learned which you thought that this is insane? I wouldn't have known this if I wouldn't have joined lead. Something specific to lead, or some specific projects.
The entire course was awesome, but there's something specific that's coming to my mind. So in Power of Story, it builds a culture of storytelling where you advocate for stories and find opportunities for your organization to collect and treasure those stories. So we use a lot of storytelling, right, in our presentations, in the way of working to present back. But this was around, how to get the right stories from the custodians of the stories. So think salespeople, users, people who are in the call center, who are close to the customer. How could you get the stories about the customer from these frontline staff and keep it visible for the UX team, so that they can actually understand the customer without any guesswork. So there was one particular example from Bare Essentials, where they were launching a new makeup product. The free samples, they gave that to all their frontline staff, and they asked for one thing in exchange. They just asked them to fill a card in return, which asked for who are you giving this product to and why, and all
Okay.
these different
So,
specific
so you were
examples.
giving out free samples to the vendors, the local vendors, is it?
So this was something that happened in Bare Essentials, which is a company,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
this is a
yeah. I've
case
heard
study
about
that
it.
I read about in the course.
Yeah.
So what they did is, when they launched a new product, they had limited number of
Yeah.
that product. So they gave that to their frontline staff, the
Yeah.
salespeople. It was a purple eyeshadow, actually. So they gave it to them,
Okay.
and they said, you can give this out to any customer who
Yeah.
comes, but you have to fill out a card saying why you gave this to that customer. What
Okay.
made you do that? So what they are doing there strategically is getting the customer profile, right? What are the
Yeah.
different types of customers coming,
Yes.
and which customer is meaningful for that particular salesperson.
A really interesting way of doing the survey,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they get something in return. They feel like, oh my god, I'm getting free stuff and just a card. Like I can just fill this up. Like it doesn't feel like work.
Yes,
So most likely you're
exactly.
gonna get a lot of responses.
Exactly. And also the quality of the responses. One of the responses that was there was where one of the store reps went in to make up a cancer patient, and she did her makeup, and then both of them cried. And then she had this written in a very heartfelt manner in the card, which
Oh.
flew right away to the head office. So look at some designer who's in the head office who's designing this. So they see what the customer base is looking at without any guessworks. These are actual stories from actual people,
Yeah.
right? So in our organizations, we need to enable that story culture, where these stories can flow seamlessly from these different touch points into a very visible board, or a very visible Miro board or artifact, where people can actually see it. We can actually take cases out of real customers and then build on that. We'll always have a lot of quantitative data
Yeah.
on all our customers, where they dropped
Absolutely.
off, why they're doing that, how many signed in. But
Yes.
this qualitative data also needs to be put together in a repository, and stories are an excellent way of representing this
Yeah.
qualitative data, because stories
But
have
when you
purpose.
have a lot of qualitative data, how do you put that? Like, let's say, I mean, I know the number of people who come for the interview of qualitative are always going to be comparative to less than the quantitative. But then, like, especially when you're giving out the samples, let's say there are 50 people, which is, I think, insane. But then let's consider that 50 people. How are you going to put every one of their stories? How can we do that?
So you can start with a Miro board, a space. In case of Barra Essential, which was that wall which was there in the head office, and you can start putting these stories. You can start doing a thematic analysis on the stories, group similar stories together, so
Right.
that when someone comes looking for a specific theme, it's already there.
Yeah.
This can also be very impactful when you want to present the impact of design back to the stakeholders. You'll have the story bank ready
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of looking for that
I
at the
like
time
this.
of
I like this
presentation.
word story bank. What is it? Like, what is story bank?
It's a collection of all the stories that you collected that you can use
Okay.
for future purposes. So they talk about story banks, which as a way of empowering organizations, because they understand that stories have meaning, and when we look at stories, it's very easy to see the impact that we are
Yes.
bringing to people's lives,
Yeah.
right? And
And
that
these
is
stories
transformative.
are basically UX case studies, mostly.
It can be anything. Like, for example, a customer walks in during the user testing session.
Oh, it can be user journeys as well.
It can be
It can be
anything.
anything.
In a banking context, a customer walks in, he comes, he tries to understand a product that we are proposing. He doesn't
Right.
understand it, he gets frustrated by it.
Yeah.
This is a customer story. You
Okay.
call the call center, trying to understand what a particular feature is or where to find it. They're unable to find it, they're frustrated. This is also a customer story.
Okay, like that. In that program of Lead, everyone used to just create stories and put it in the story bank. And once you have accumulated enough number of stories, can anyone access it from the story bank? Let's say I have um, put in my story in the story bank. Can somebody else use my story?
So in lead, it was more like adding value to your organization by creating story banks for your organization. It was open to everybody in the course, so anybody can read anybody else's stories. But they had three specific funnels where you could get the stories from. So there were first purpose stories,
It has
categories.
divided into multiple categories.
Yes.
What are the categories?
So we had in each module one category. So we had a purpose story
Yeah.
where you would try to collect stories from your peers. You collected from your peers and your leaders
Right.
about you on how you align to the organization's
Yes.
purposes. Then you have leadership story where you again collect through these funnels
And
how
everything
you
is specific to design, right?
you can make it specific to whatever you want. So since I am writing these, it was specific to design.
Okay.
It was about leadership and the areas where you demonstrated leadership. And the third was customer stories where you could collect it directly from the customers. In the course, they
It's
do talk
underrated.
about they do talk about how to craft a compelling
Right.
story. So they talk about how we can make our posts more intriguing, more authentic, more goal centric, and involve all our customers, which are the four bare essentials for any story. They talk about that, but they also talk about building this culture, which is where a lot of focus is. And there are organizations that already do that, where they have these story banks ready, and they actually use that to inspire other people and
Yeah.
align people when there are varying subsets. It's like
Right.
user testing results,
Yes.
right? Where you could actually bring that qualitative insight and then speak from that story. There are a lot of examples in the course from various disciplines, domains, where people have used story to move people.
So just to summarize the lead program part, if anybody wants to be a part of this, what they can do in easy steps, if you can tell me.
It has some specific entry criteria.
Right.
So the GSP is all about changing lives, changing organizations,
Right.
changing the world. So in your essay, you'll need to highlight on how you would take the learnings from lead to
make
sort
change.
of make change in the next 1 year in your organization through the lead program. You'll need to fill an application form. There is also some recommendations letters that
Yeah.
you need to get from your peers, colleagues,
Okay, like
leadership,
that.
etc. And at the second step, you have a virtual interview, which has 2 to 3 questions, which you'll need to answer.
Okay.
And post that, they'll do an evaluation and get back to you.
That's amazing. I think a lot of people might just like immediately Google search like what this is all about. This is so fascinating. Would you vouch for freelancing? Like people don't need to you don't need to be recognized really. I feel like if you can get the job done, I think you can get the work.
I have done a lot of freelancing work in the initial years of my career when I was trying to make some credibility for myself. It's a good way to go, but you have to be aware of the regulations of the country that
Right.
you're in, whether
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
support that or not. It's different, very vastly different.
How can somebody
Develop.
start on freelancing? Like, as somebody who is a UX working professional, I can talk about myself. I'm working in a company, I'm full time. And if I want to start freelancing, what would be the best way? I don't have a portfolio ready on those Fiverr and all of this Upwork platform. So there are bidding going on. There are so many designers already occupying that space, and they have their portfolios, and then they already have ratings. And so if a new designer is coming to the picture, how can they get the project in freelancing?
So I think if you're a new designer, especially, go for something that is contact based. So some work that is coming out of your contacts,
Right.
so that you don't have the time pressure that is normally there or associate, or the competitive edge that is there in any of these margins and
Right.
markets. So in these platforms, basically. So I started with for my colleagues for websites they wanted to build
Okay.
for their projects, for their startups.
And you put that in your
And then I can
portfolio.
add that and put that in my portfolio. And then there's also a lot of publicity that you get out of that, right? Because then they show this website to somebody else, and
Yeah.
then you get another potential client from there.
Okay, it's a chain. Like
It's
you
a
start
chain.
somewhere.
It's to start small, right?
Right.
Especially when you're starting out.
Absolutely.
You cannot take all of that pressure on yourself, and you're also learning. So
Right.
start small. The first project will give you enough confidence to do the second one, and it will go on. Like you're saying, right? I believe a lot in putting effort into the universe,
Yeah.
and it would just come back.
I feel like intention is important. If you have the intention of giving, then most likely it's gonna work. But if you have the intention to take it, then it's not on you. Like you are, at mercy of other people's approval. You are giving, but then at the same time your intention is taking. So it's like you're expecting other people's approval, you need other people's validation, and so it just might not work. And most probably in most cases it's not going to work. The day I've learned from a spiritual practice called Kabbalah, and it says that the day you don't seek for other people's validation, and we have the mindset of actually giving out and not expecting anything in return, we get a lot back.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And it's that same concept, right? Without giving, without expecting anything back.
Yeah.
It's
Written
beautiful.
everywhere. Like it's written all the holy books you will find, and actually there are small lessons everywhere. We just don't know enough about it. We think that okay, it's again a stereotype thing like people are talking about, but then it's cliche, but it's true. Like if you know the science behind it, then it's true.
That's the reason why we started Cocoon, but I also do a lot of art outside of work. I'm very fascinated by the Indian folk art forms that are there. So I'm a trained mural painting artist for Kerala, traditional Kerala mural style. And I also make it an effort to learn all of our endangered art forms. And I try to give back by creating small, workshops where people can come and learn this. So we do very small artifacts, commercialized stuff like bookmarks, postcards, things like that. It's 1 to 2 hours in the weekend, maybe for a month, where people would come, and then we would train them in these traditional styles, teach them how to do it, and then they can go back with something that they created. I feel very accomplished when I do that, because I feel like I'm promoting my culture and I'm sharing that with a wider audience,
Yeah.
right? Giving without expecting anything in return is the, I think, biggest reward that anybody can get.
I had an amazing conversation. We'll just quickly kind of wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming, Arya. It means a lot. And I think a lot of people, especially designers, are going to get a lot of value from this podcast. And yeah.
Wonderful speaking with you.
Yeah.